Hello everyone, it's Zach here from RealEstateLicenseWizard.com. Today I'm going to go over 100 questions from our National Real Estate Practice Exam. Now this will be our 2022 version, and if you watched our previous versions, you should already be familiar with the format. If not, I highly encourage you check out our 2021, 2020, and 2019 videos, as the versions are slightly different, but the information in those videos are still very relevant and a fantastic study resource. So this version, we have lots of new questions mixed in, and we're probably going to add a new version every year or so. So if you're watching this in the distant future, make sure to look for that too. The way this works is I go through every question, read it over, give you guys an opportunity to think about the question, and then you come up with your answer. Now, I highly encourage you guys to grab a paper and pencil and follow along. That way it's just like taking a real exam, and you can have a simulated test experience. Now, if you guys want to take the real deal, head over to our website, RealEstateLicenseWizard.com. There we have this practice exam, as well as our prep course, flashcards, and more. Now, lastly, before we get started, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you're new to this channel. That way you can pass the exam, no problem. Anyways, buckle up, grab some paper, popcorn, all that good stuff, and let's get started. Alrighty, question number 1. The ability to buy and sell is also known as what essential element of value? A, demand, B, utility, C, scarcity, D, transferability. So like always throughout, I'm going to give you guys a brief opportunity to read it over, pause if you need to, and come up with your answer. So go ahead and do that right now. Okay, hopefully you came up with your answer. If not, again, feel free to pause, no biggie. Alright, so what is the correct answer for this one? Well, it's going to be D, transferability. Remember dust and your essential elements of value. DUST is an acronym that stands for demand, utility, scarcity, and then transferability. And obviously each one of those things mean different things, which we'll get into a little bit later. But again, you need to know your essential elements of value for the real estate exam. And of course, the one that refers to buying and selling is obviously transferability. All right, next question. The person who hires or appoints an agent is called the, and it gives us 4 options. A, deputy, B, principal, C, fiduciary, or D, customer. So go ahead and take an opportunity to figure out your answer right now. Alrighty, so what is the correct answer for this one? Well, it's going to be B. That's right, it's the principal. And it's not the principal of a school, no. The person who hires or appoints an agent is called the principal. In plain terms, the principals in real estate sales transactions would be the buyer and the seller. Those are the principal, or the principals, depending on the situation. Obviously, you need to be familiar with the principal versus agent relationship. If you're not, this one probably might be a little confusing to you. But yeah, obviously the principal is the correct answer because that's who, again, hires and appoints the agent. Alrighty, next one. Okay, CRV stands for Certificate of Reasonable Value and is issued by who? And it gives us 4 options. A, Fannie Mae, B, the Federal Mortgage Association, C, the Federal Housing Administration, or D, the Department of Veterans Affairs. So go ahead and take some time and figure that one out. Okay, so hopefully you came with your answer on that one. What is the correct answer? Well, it is D. That's right, it's the Department of Veteran Affairs. So once the appraiser or appraisal has been performed on a property being bought with a VA loan, the Department of Veterans Affairs issues a certificate of reasonable value. A certificate of real estate value documents the price at which a property was sold, as well as the unique terms that were added to the transaction prior to its completion. So obviously you need to be familiar with this specific certificate and its relationship with the Department of Veterans Affairs. Okay, next one. Question number 4. An example of economic obsolescence in real estate is, and it gives us 4 options: A, old kitchen cabinets; B, a pool built at your mother's house; C, a noisy highway built right next to your home; or D, sellers not being able to afford property due to economic factors. Okay, think that one over. Here's some time for you. Okay, so what is the correct answer for this one? Well, it's going to be C, a noisy highway built right next to your home. So economic obsolescence refers to the loss of property value due to external factors, meaning things off the property affecting the property's value. A noisy highway would be considered economic obsolescence because it is an external factor. Usually in these circumstances, homeowners cannot do anything to prevent it. That's normally how you know it's economic obsolescence, because think about it. Unless you go out and, write a big petition to get the highway removed, chances are you really can't do anything as the homeowner to solve economic obsolescence. All right, next one. Question number 5. Economic life is the length of time during which a piece of property may be put to profitable use. Economic life is usually A, neither shorter or longer than physical life; B, shorter than physical life; C, the same as physical life; and D, longer than physical life. So go ahead and think about that one and come up with the correct answer. Okay, so what is the correct answer for this one? Well, it's going to be B. That's right, it's shorter than physical life. And this makes sense, right? When an asset is no longer useful to its owner, then it is said to be past its economic life. So the economic life of an asset could be different than its actual physical life. However, again, economic life usually is shorter than physical life, as a structure generally will still physically exist but not be, utilized in the marketplace. For example, if there is some sort of, I don't know, an older warehouse, and it's used to transport goods from business, lots of businesses and stuff like that. Well, let's say maybe its economic life is only 50 years, but the building is still going to exist maybe for 100 years, because let's just say all the wear and tear, maybe all the trucks and all that stuff, and maybe the business, they don't want to use the property anymore. Maybe it's just like run down. But again, it still exists. Maybe maybe another business wants to come in and buy up that building. But again, its economic life doesn't exist. Does that make sense? Hopefully. Again, it's going to be shorter than its physical life. So just make sure you understand that, because again, that's really important to distinguish. Alrighty, next one. Question number 6. Which of the following is a physical characteristic of real estate? And it gives us 4 options. Scarcity, A, scarcity, B, improvements, C, indestructibility, or D, permanence of investment. So go ahead and think that one over and come up with your answer. Okay, so hopefully you guys came up with your answer. What is the correct answer for this one? Well, it's going to be C, indestructibility. So this kind of comes up, what I was just talking about in terms of, again, most forms of real estate, the real estate part is going to be indestructible. So obviously real estate has 3 physical characteristics that, are different than other assets in the economy. 1, indestructibility, obviously meaning that land cannot be destroyed or worn out. Its appearance may be altered, which again, that's kind of what we were talking about earlier, but it's always going to continue to exist. 2, immobility, meaning geographic location of a property remains the same and it can't be changed. It's fixed. And then 3, uniqueness or non-homogeneity, meaning no parcels of real estate are exactly alike. And then obviously scarcity, improvements, and permanence of investment are all economic characters of real estate. So those aren't physical, they're economic. And again, you need to know the difference. All right, next one. Okay, question number 7. The fact there is a limited amount of land on Earth represents what essential element of value? And it gives us 4 answers. A, demand, B, utility, C, scarcity, or D, transferability. So go ahead and think that one over. Alrighty. Gave you a little bit shorter on time on that one because I kind of just gave you guys the answer, the last one for this one. So this one is going to be C, it's scarcity. So the crazy thing about these exams, and obviously it's going to be like this on exam day, is you could have questions that are back to back that are somewhat relative. And, it's not a bad idea sometimes to skip if you don't know and then go back and then figure it out. Because sometimes you never know. Sometimes questions will almost like present themselves in a different way and give you guys a hint, and figuring it out and all that good stuff. So anyways, back to this one. So yeah, scarcity. Remember that dust, remember what we talked about in the beginning of this video? Demand, utility, scarcity, transferability. Scarcity just means it's limited in supply, and as supply diminishes, value increases, which obviously that gets into that whole supply and demand thing, which I'm sure is going to show up in this practice exam. But it's, again, one of those things that you really need to know, especially with real estate economics, because it does show up on the exam. Okay, next one. Question number 8. What is the difference between the market value of your home and the amount you owe the lender who holds the mortgage? And it gives us 4 options. A, appreciation, B, variance, C, proration, or D, equity. So go ahead and think that one over. Okay, so what is the correct answer for this one? Well, it's going to be D. That's right, it's equity. So the term is used very often in real estate. Equity is the difference between the market value of your home and the amount you owe the lender who holds the mortgage. Your equity is the money you'd receive after paying off the mortgage if you were to sell the home. So for example, let's say the market value for your home is, $150,000, and you owe the lender $50,000. You would have $100,000 worth of equity in the home. pretty straightforward. Pretty simple concept if you kind of, just think of it like that. Think of it super simple. Okay, number 9. What best describes an agent hired to perform a specific duty? And it gives us 4 options. A, a special agency. B, a general agency. C, a universal agency. Or D, an exclusive agency. So go ahead and think that one over and come up with your answer. Alrighty, so what is the correct answer for this one? Well, it's going to be A. That's right, a special agency. Fun little story about that. We literally just posted an article on our website about that literally today. So it's a coincidence that we got this question. Anyways, so a special agent is an agent hired to perform a specific duty. The real estate agent's power and authority is limited to that specific task. An example would be if you list a house on behalf of a seller, you are hired for one specific job, listing and selling the house. Now, once that job is complete, then the agency relationship is over. That is a specific duty again and a special agency. So again, just kind of think of it as like the same thing. Someone's doing a specific duty, just assume that that's a special agent or special agency relationship. Alrighty, next one. Question number 10. The owner of a secluded area adjacent to the ocean noticed that people from the local town walked along the shore in front of his property. The owner learned that the local citizens have been walking along this beach for half a century. The owner went to the court to try to stop people from walking along the water's edge in front of his property. The owner is likely to be, and it gives us 4 options. A, unsuccessful because the owner's property extends only to the high water mark and the public can use the land beyond this point. B, unsuccessful because the locals have been doing this for over 5 years, in parentheses, statute of frauds. C, successful because the locals have been doing this for less than 100 years, in parentheses, statute of frauds. And then D, successful because the owner's property extends 100 feet into the ocean per his riparian rights. So that one was a bit of a mouthful there, but hopefully you guys get this one and, come up with the answer. So go ahead and think it over right now. Alrighty, did you guys come up with the correct answer? Hopefully, let's see. Alright, so the correct answer for this one's going to be A. That's right, A. So unsuccessful because the owner's property extends only to the high water mark and the public can use the land beyond this point. So a landowner, or an owner of land, which borders a navigable waterway, owns the property up to the high water mark at the water's edge. Now, the government owns the water and land beneath it, and the public has an easement right to travel on the water. The owner would be unsuccessful because, again, the owner's property extends only to the high water mark. So, again, this is one of those specific, super hyper specific scenario questions that you just need to be familiar with. You need to be familiar with your water rights and all that's included in that, and of course the scenarios. This is one of those scenarios that they just like to throw out there and see, because again, land ownership when it gets involved with water can be murky, no pun intended. That's one. I'll be making jokes while I'm here, all trying to make this more fun. I could hear everybody laughing at the same time. Anyways, it's murky. Point being, you need to be familiar with these scenarios. You need to be familiar with these water rights, obviously, because, again, maybe you guys are watching this video in Florida or, other areas where there's, maybe surrounded by water, things like that. It comes up all the time. So they really want you to be familiar with this kind of stuff. Alrighty, next question. Question 11. Amendments and addendum are essentially the same thing, correct? Choose the best answer. All right. A, incorrect. An amendment typically changes terms of contract. An addendum adds terms to a contract. B, incorrect. An addendum typically changes terms of a contract. An amendment adds terms to the contract. C, correct. They are the same things. Amendments are used in government laws, whereas addendums are used for civil documents. And then D, correct. They're the same thing and can be used interchangeably. So go ahead and think that one over. Okay, so what is the correct answer for this one? Well, it's going to be A. That's right, it's incorrect. It's incorrect. An amendment typically changes terms of a contract. An addendum adds terms to a contract. So, for example, let's say a buyer and seller have agreed to an April 10th closing date, but later both agreed to change the closing date to April 25th. They would use an amendment. Addendums are used to add or delete terms of a contract not previously agreed to. So that's the difference there. So hopefully that makes sense. And of course, that's just one of those contract terms and contract, real estate contract stuff that you need to be aware of. You need to be familiar with this kind of stuff. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. Okay, question number 12. A contract for the sale of real estate that does not state the consideration to be paid for the property and is not signed by the parties is considered what? And it gives us 4 options: A, void; B, valid; C, voidable; or D, executed. So think this one over and hopefully come up with the correct answer. Okay, so hopefully you got this one. What is the correct answer for this one? Well, it's going to be A, void. That's right, it's a void contract. So a void contract is one that lacks all or one of the elements that make a valid contract. The contract is invalid at the time of its establishment and is not legally enforceable. Since a contract needs consideration for it to be valid, it is immediately considered void. It is not voidable because voidable contracts have the necessary elements to be enforceable, but are rejected by one party for any number of defects. See the difference? Hopefully. Yeah, you need to be able to tell the difference between obviously void, voidable, and valid, and even executed, which might come up later on this practice exam, but we'll see. So yeah, if you're unfamiliar with those things, I highly encourage you, recap and study those. Okay, next one. Question number 13. Closing is always the blank step in executing a real estate transaction. A, second; B, third; C, fourth; D, final. So take some time and think that one over. Come with your answer. Okay, so what is the correct answer for this one? Well, it's going to be D. That's right, final. Closing is always the final step in executing a real estate transaction. Obviously, closing is known by many names, but traditionally it's called closing, and it is always, always the final step in executing a real estate transaction. All right, question number 14. Which of the following would be classified as consideration in a real estate contract? Okay, so there's 4 options: A, money; B, work; C, a promise; or D, all of the above. All right, so think that one over and come up with your answer. Okay, hopefully you guys came up with that one. So what is the correct answer for this one? Well, it's going to be D, all of the above. So this is a little bit of a trick question. I wanna see how many of you guys got this one. But consideration is anything of legal value that is offered in exchange by one party for something of value from another party. Common forms of consideration include money, property, work, or promise to perform. But obviously the keynote is without consideration, a contract is not valid. Now I'm curious how many of you guys just put money, because I think a lot of people get this mixed up. They think, oh, consideration, that has to be money. You know, that's it. Consideration's money. But no, it can be other things. It could be, again, the property in exchange, or maybe a promise, you know, a promise to perform, a promise to work, things like that. Those all can be examples of consideration. So keep that in mind. All right, next one, question number 15. When a home is purchased using an adjustable rate mortgage, or ARM, the monthly loan payment on the mortgage will, and it gives us 4 options. A, be adjusted automatically to ensure that profitability occurs. B, rise slightly in each adjustment period until the cap is reached. C, be based on a very low interest rate, but will rise to the market rate at the first adjustment. D, vary over the life of the loan, depending on fluctuations in the interest rate to which the loan is referenced. Alrighty, so take some time, read it over, and come up with your answer on that one. Okay, hopefully you guys come up with the answer on that one. What is our correct answer for this one? Well, it's going to be D. That's right, D. When a home is purchased using an adjustable rate mortgage, the monthly loan on the mortgage will vary over the life of the loan depending on fluctuations in interest rate to which the loan is referenced. And loan payment is what I meant to say. But yeah, so a variable rate mortgage or adjustable rate mortgage or tracker mortgage is just a mortgage loan with an interest rate that is periodically adjusted based on an index which reflects the cost of the lender of borrowing on the credit markets. So these loans can be used for somebody who maybe anticipates, hey, maybe interest rates will be later. You know, maybe reports are coming that the economy is going to be great the next 5 years, and you think the interest rates are going to go down. So that might make sense for you. You know, this one might make sense for somebody in that position. But for most people, this isn't, you know, ideal. Obviously, we're living in some crazy times with interest rates. So most of the time, I'd say it's best to get a loan where, you know, you have a flat interest rate, you know, where it's not adjusting. But I'm not particularly an expert in that. A mortgage specialist will be, but I do like to give my 2 cents here and there because, again, when you guys are out there working with clients and stuff like that, they're going to ask your opinion sometimes, and you just have to reiterate you're not an expert, but you know, you can share what your opinion on that specifically is. But in terms of you know, the real estate exam and being a real estate agent, obviously, yes, this comes up all the time because you're going to be working with your clients and they're going to be asking you questions, and you're going to have to define, because they might ask, hey, what is this adjustable rate mortgage, and is it for me? And you'll be, you know, you have to answer, and you have to answer and, you know exactly what to say. Okay, question number 16. Puffing is a term referring to, and it gives us 4 options. A large increase of sellers in a specific market. B, massive inflation of prices due to economic gains. C, extravagant claims made by sellers in order to attract buyers. Or D, using another agent's funds to buy a property with their permission. So, going to give you guys a moment to think that one over. So go ahead and do that now. Okay, puffing. What is puffing? Well, the correct answer for this one is obviously C. So puffing is extravagant, or puffing is an extravagant claim made by sellers in order to attract buyers. Now, puffing is usually common for a lot of salespeople, real estate agents included. It's one of those things that occur often, happens in ads, stores, pretty much everywhere sales happen. Puffing is legal as long as the statements are not fraudulent. And that's super important to understand because when we talk about fraud, which I'm sure we will, it'll come up in this practice exam at least once or twice, and it'll definitely come up on your exam. That's one of those things that you need to be able to tell what is fraud and what is not fraud. So if you have trouble with that, I definitely encourage you study up on that. Okay, question 17. Unlike apartments, which are leased by their tenants, condominium units are owned outright. A condominium is often shortened to, and it gives us 4 options: A, CCRs, B, co-ops, C, corps, or D, condos. So take a moment to think that one over and come up with your answer. Okay, this one's a pretty easy one. So obviously, condominium units are often shortened to D, condos. Now, a condominium is a type of living space which is similar to an apartment, but is independently sellable and therefore regarded as real estate. Now, unlike apartments, which are leased by tenants, condominium units are owned outright. A condominium is often shortened to condo. What's the difference between a condo and a co-op? Well, a condo is a private residence in a multi-unit structure that includes ownership of commonly used property. A co-op is a multi-unit building, but that's where the similarities end. A co-op owner has interest or share in the entire building, and a contract or lease that allows the owner to occupy a unit. So while a condo owner owns a unit, a co-op owner does not own a unit. So I went off on a little bit of a tangent there, but I think that that's an important distinguishing feature between the two, and especially when we're talking about condos, stuff like that. You need to be familiar with all these different forms of real estate. Even if, you might think it's simple, you might be thinking, oh, I obviously know what a condo is. But a lot of people, you'd be surprised, they don't know this kind of stuff. So, you got to be familiar with it. Okay, 18. What is the outcome when a purchaser signs a purchase agreement and gives the seller's broker a large check? And it gives us 4 options. A, this transaction is considered a contract. B, this transaction is considered an offer. C, this transaction is considered invalid. Or D, this transaction is an amendment. So take some time to think about that one and come up with your answer. Alrighty, so don't overthink this one. This one's pretty straightforward. The correct answer is B. This transaction is considered an offer. So when a purchaser signs a purchase agreement and gives the seller's broker a large check, that is considered an offer. When a potential buyer is found, the agent must help them prepare an offer to purchase the property. Now, the form itself is usually pre-drafted or pre-printed, and forms vary from state to state, but it is customary, but not required, which that might come up a little later, to provide a deposit when making a offer to purchase. But yeah, again, when we're talking about these things, what is this outcome? What is this scenario? You need to be familiar with that particular scenario, whatever it might be. And obviously, we know this is considered an offer. This transaction is considered an offer. Okay, next one, 19. The bundle of rights include A, possession, ability, illusion, enjoyment, disposition. B, possession, ability, exclusion, enjoyment, disposition. C, possession, control, illusion, enjoyment, disposition. Or D, possession, control, exclusion, enjoyment, and disposition. So, like always, here's a quick opportunity to reread it, think about it, and come up with your answer. So go ahead and do that right now. Alrighty, so what is the correct answer for this one? Do you know your bundle of rights? Let's find out. The correct answer is D. Possession, control, exclusion, enjoyment, disposition. Owning real estate obviously comes with it a bundle of rights. The bundle of rights is, as we talked about, possession, control, exclusion, enjoyment, disposition. Won't get too much into what those are. We might talk about those later. But if not, essentially, those are your rights to, do what you want with the property. And obviously they have their different meanings, but a good way to think of a bundle of rights is like a bundle of sticks, because you can split them up if you want, give them to another party, or just keep them all to yourself. Completely up to you. All right, next. Which of the following is a lien? And it gives us 4 options. A, novation, B, a mortgage, C, an easement, or D, an investment. So take this time to think it over and come with your answer. Okay, what is the correct answer for this one? Well, it is going to be B. It is a mortgage. That's right, a mortgage. So what is a lien, for those of you who don't know? A lien is a legal claim on an asset. Mortgages are typically a type of lien, as it provides the lender a claim over the borrower's assets and allows the lender the right to detain the assets, property, or goods to secure payment. So yes, obviously a mortgage is a form of lien. 21. Which of the following statements is true about trusts and trustors? And it gives us 4 options. A trustor is the one who transfers a property upon the trustee. B, a trustee is the one who transfers a property upon the trustor. C, a trustor must be an individual, not an organization, per federal law. And then D, a trustor must be a financial institution such as a bank, per federal law. So take some time, think that one over, and come up with your answer. Okay, so what is the correct answer for this one? Well, it's going to be A. A trustor is the one who transfers a property upon the trustee. So trusts can be created during an individual's lifetime, or they can be established following someone's death. A trust works as it follows. The first party, the trustor or settlor, transfers a property upon the second party for the benefit of the third party being the beneficiary. The trustee is required to manage the trust property in accordance with the trustor's wishes and in the beneficiary's best interests. A trustor can be an individual or organization. So knowing all of that, we know that definitely the question or the answer to the question is A. All right, next one. Question number 22. If a contract has prepayment penalties, they can be found in which real estate contract clause? A, in the habendum clause, B, in the defeasance clause, C, in the prepayment penalty clause, or D, in the penalty and insurance clause. So go ahead and think that one over. Okay, so what is the correct answer for this one? Well, this is one of those don't overthink questions. Obviously, prepayment penalties is going to be in the prepayment penalty clause. C is your answer. So what does that clause state? Well, it states that a lender can penalize a borrower if the borrower pays off the mortgage much sooner than usual. Lenders are required to disclose prepayment penalties at closing in the form of a prepayment penalty clause. Now, the good news about this is they're becoming a lot less common, and this question, I believe, was on the last year's exam, and I kind of explained that. But again, it's becoming less common because it's kind of predatory and not like the most fair thing. I mean, think about it. You just paid off your home early and they slap you with a penalty. I mean, come on, that's kind of ridiculous, right? But anyways, you need to be familiar with this. Obviously, it shows up in the exam, but obviously in your career, people might ask about this. If maybe they're desperate to get a loan and they find one, but it has prepayment penalties. Obviously, you're gonna have to be aware of that and explain to your client kind of what this means and what it is. So, all right, next one, question number 23. A property owner enters into a leasing agreement with an agent. Another agent obtains a buyer for the house, and the first agent does not receive a commission. The listing agreement between the first agent and the property owner was probably, and it gives us 4 options: A, an open listing, B, a closed listing, C, an exclusive agency listing, or D, an exclusive right to sell listing. So take some time, reread that one, and come up with your answer. Okay, so what is the correct answer for this one? Well, it's going to be A. It's an open listing. So, open listings are truly open. Sellers might consider an open listing if there are a lot of buyers in the marketplace. An open listing is when an agent or broker can participate in the listing and is entitled to a commission if he or she produces the sale. Since the listing agreement between the first agent wasn't met, it had to be an open listing because another agent obtained a buyer. So the hint in this question obviously comes with where it says here, the first agent does not receive a commission, meaning we can deduce that it's an open listing because, again, they didn't receive a commission. If they did, we know that it would be a different form of listing, which we potentially will talk about later. Okay, 24. The owner of a condominium has use of many faculties or facilities there, including a pool. Under the typical condominium agreement, the facilities are owned by, and it gives us 4 options: A, the corporation in which each of the owners hold stock; B, the association of homeowners in the condominium; C, some of the condominium owners in the form of divided interest; or D, all the condominium owners in the form of a percentage of undivided interest. So go ahead, take some time, think that one over, and come up with your answer. Alrighty. So another condominium question. What is the answer for this one? Well, it's going to be D. It's all the condominium owners in the form of a percentage of undivided interest. So obviously we talked a little bit about this earlier, but unlike apartments, which are leased by tenants, condominium units are owned outright. So the answer is, again, all of the condominium owners own it in the form of percentage of undivided interest because all condominium owners legally own a portion of the facilities there. Makes sense? Hopefully. Alrighty, next one. Question number 25. An interest in real property which is held for the duration of a life of a designated person is called A, and it gives us 4 options: A, a life estate; B, fee simple absolute; C, feasible to feasible, or D, estate at will. So take some time and come up with your answer on that one. Alrighty, what is the correct answer for this one? Well, it's going to be A. That's right, a life estate. So, a life estate is an interest in real property which is held for the duration of the life of a designated person. It may be limited by the life of the person holding it or by the life of another person. Now, that designated person is called a life tenant. Alrighty, next question, 26. The period over which a property may be utilized is called its, and it gives us 4 options: A, economic life, B, amortized life, C, income life, or D, net life. So go ahead and come up with your answer on that one. Okay, what is the correct answer for this one? If any of you guys got this wrong, I'm going to get mad at you because we went over this earlier. It's A, economic life. So, economic life is the expected period of time during which an asset remains useful to the owner. When the asset is no longer useful to its owner, then it's said to be past its quote unquote economic life. The economic life of an asset could be different than its actual physical life, which again, we talked about that earlier. It all comes full circle, guys. All right, question 27. What type of ownership model is used for vacation real estate in which multiple purchasers own allotments of usage, typically in 1-week increments for the same property? And there's 4 options: A, condo, B, timeshare, C, condominium, or D, ownership in severalty. So think that one over and come up with your answer. Alrighty, did you guys come up with the answer? So what is it? It's going to be B, timeshare. So this is another one of those specific forms of real estate that you need to be familiar with. And you could work residential real estate and never deal with, timeshares ever in your life. There's a possibility of that. But again, they're going to test you on all these different things, and you just need to be aware of them. So you need to be aware of timeshares, condominiums, how they operate, all that stuff. So again, that's why a lot of this stuff comes up. Okay, 28. Which of the following is an economic characteristic of real estate? And it gives us 4 options: scarcity, mobility, uniqueness, and indestructibility. So go ahead and think that one over. Okay, so hopefully you guys got this one as well. You guys are lucking out this time around. There's a lot of questions that are overlapping. And just think. I'm gonna go off on a brief tangent, and I apologize for those of you guys who can't stand it, but I know that 95% of you guys enjoy my tangents from what I heard in the comments. But listen, this is a perfect example of why it's so important to understand the foundation for a lot of these concepts. Because if you didn't understand part A of these economic characteristics, then B, C, and D, and like all these other things, they just snowball. And what turns into 5 questions that you easily could have got turns into 5 questions that you didn't. So again, this is just a great example showing you guys that you do need to know these foundations of all these different topics for the real estate exam. And again, I know it's easier said than done. I'm sure you guys have been studying for hours upon hours and upon hours. But again, like, don't miss the little things, really, because they generate these exams, and you could get 5 questions on that one section that only you needed to only study for 2 hours, but you're like, nah, I already studied for all this other stuff. I'm not going to get into it. But seriously, I mean, just put in the extra time. I don't mean to sound rough, and it's tough love, guys. It's all coming from a good place. But seriously, put in the extra time. Do those little sections that you might not be 100% sure on, because again, this is a perfect example. It could snowball, and the next thing you know, you could lose 5 questions just like that because you forgot to do the small section that you thought, I don't need to know that. But yeah, tangent over. I love you guys. Anyways, okay, 28. What is the correct answer for 28? Well, it's going to be scarcity. That's right. So we talked about this a little bit earlier. There's 3 physical characteristics, and then obviously there's economic characteristics. So an economic characteristic would be scarcity, because again, the total supply is fixed. It's economic, has to deal with economics. These other ones are going to be physical. Alrighty, next question. Question number 29. Whose obligation is it to disclose potential lead-based paint to buyers of homes built before 1978? And it gives us 4 options. A, the seller, B, the buyer's agent, C, the listing agent, or D, either the listing or buyer's agent. So go ahead and think that one over and come with your answer. Okay, so I'm really curious who got this one right and who didn't, because this is one of the ones that I see people get mixed up all the time. So the question was, whose obligation is it to disclose potential lead-based paint to buyers of homes built before 1978? So the correct answer for this one is going to be A. It's the seller. That's right, it is the seller. It's the seller that must make the disclosure. Now, it's the real estate professional's job to make sure all parties are in compliance with the law, but ultimately, it's the seller's obligation. So again, it's one of those trick questions that if you're not familiar, with your lead-based paint laws and, disclosures, obviously, you're gonna get confused, because to the average eye, I think a lot of people would put, and maybe this is one of you guys right now. Maybe you put, oh, well, clearly it would be like, the agent or the listing agent or buyer's agent, because, that's our job. But again, remember, it's the real estate professional job to make sure parties are compliant with the law, but ultimately it's the seller's obligation. So again, there's a difference between obligation and compliance, and expressing the rules and the laws and how they work. A real estate agent, they can only do so much. Once they say, once they hand that disclosure and they go over these things, if the seller doesn't disclose it and hides it, that's on them. But yeah, that's it for that one. Okay, question number 30. Often required for mortgages, property insurance for a home is commonly called what? And there's 4 options. A, ownership insurance, B, homeowner's insurance, C, property tax, or D, property tax insurance. So go ahead and think that one over. Okay, so pretty straightforward one, but again, one of those ones where you don't need to overthink it. So many people do overthink things, and I've done numerous videos about this. Keep it simple. Seriously, homeowners insurance is your answer for this one. It's often required for mortgages, like 99% of the time. But yeah, most loans require some form of homeowners insurance. All right, next one. Ooh, a little bit of a lengthy one. Buckle up. All right, here we go. Question 31. Mrs. Jane lives in a small residential neighborhood. 100-year-old trees surround her home, and her neighbor, Mr. Joe, claims the trees are on his property and is planning on cutting them down. Mrs. Jane tries to reason with Mr. Joe, but he refuses to listen. Mrs. Jane files a lawsuit that includes a court order for Mr. Joe to stop his actions until they work something out. What type of court order is this? And there's 4 options. A, a temporary protective order. B, an authorized dispute order. C, an injunction. Or D, an easement. So reread that and go through it if you need to and come up with your answer. Okay, so what is the correct answer for this one? Well, it's going to be C, an injunction. So if a dispute is pending, the court will likely issue an injunction preventing Mr. Joe from cutting down the trees until they are entirely resolved. So obviously the issues, those being resolved. Injunctions can be used to protect interest in real property. A court-ordered injunction can be used to prevent a harmful action, stop ongoing or repeated contact, or force a defendant to take action to prevent harm. So yeah, in this case, obviously it would be an injunction. Okay, next question, 32. Which of the following real estate contracts is a service contract? And it gives us 4 options. A, a purchase agreement. B, a listing agreement. C, an option contract. Or D, a mortgage. So go ahead and think that one over. Okay, so what is the correct answer for 32? Well, it's going to be a listing agreement. So which of the following real estate contracts is a service contract? The answer is B, a listing agreement. Service contracts are agreements between a customer or client and a person or a company who will be providing services. A listing agreement is a service contract between the seller and the broker or the brokerage company. So I know a couple of you guys might think it could be purchase contract, option contract, or even potentially mortgage. But again, when you're thinking of service and not maybe product or different sort of scenarios, it's going to be in this example a listing agreement. And then obviously D, I know a little. Some people get confused with this. They might put, oh well, a mortgage company is providing a service technically to the buyer, and that is correct. But notice how it says D, just a mortgage. It's not really specific on what type of agreement. Who knows if it is a service contract? It's not really detailed. Excuse me. And we know with a lot of these contracts with a lot of these questions, whatever answer is correct is going to be the most detailed answer, and the one that you can confidently, or at least somewhat confidently, say, oh yeah, that's it. They don't provide us enough information for option D, because as you know, just a mortgage itself isn't a contract, and we can get into that in another video and later. But the mortgage itself is the mortgage clause, which is included in a contract. So again, when you get into these different levels of potential answers and things like that, that's where it gets murky. I'm going to say that's twice now I said that word, but it's true. It is true. So don't overthink these things. Choose what you think would be the best answer and what you feel most confident in. If there's ever one where you're like, we're two questions and you're like, oh, this one could be it, but this one's definitely it, choose the one that's definitely it. Don't choose the one that could be it. All right. Yeah, because again, remember, I'm going to say this one more time. these entire questions and the entire exam is choose the best answer. It's not always, there's only one correct answer. It's always choose the best answer. Okay, question 33. A non-licensed buyer negotiated the purchase of a house. During a conversation with the seller agreed to include both the washer and the dryer in the sale, and this was included in the sales contract. In this situation, if the seller takes the appliances, what recourse, if any, does the buyer have? And it gives us 4 options. A, the buyer can declare the principle of performance and trade any assets he has for the assets he wants. B, the buyer has no recourse because he negotiated the sale himself. C, the buyer may sue the seller for specific performance. Or D, the buyer may sue the seller for partial performance. So go ahead and reread that and come up with an answer. Okay, so what is the correct answer for this one? Well, it's going to be C. That's right, the buyer may sue the seller for specific performance. So don't be confused with specific performance. I know a lot of you guys, the people that struggle with the performance stuff, they tend to divide up these types of situations in their head. For example, they might think, oh, it's partial performance because they still want to sell the house, but they just don't want to do the appliances. Well, yeah, I mean, in your mind, that might make sense. But guys, when we're talking about these specific terms, we have to go by the textbook's terms. And when you hear specific performance, again, that is a remedy in the law of a contract, where a court essentially issues an order requiring a party to perform a specific act or action, and that's where they get that word specific performance. So in this case, since the washer and dryer were included in the contract, the buyer may sue the seller for specific performance. Makes sense? Hopefully. Okay, 34. Which of the following would not be considered real property? And it gives us 4 options. A fixture, B, an easement, C, mineral rights, or D, a mortgage. So, like always, here's some time for you guys to come up with the answer. Okay, so what is the correct answer for this one? Well, it's going to be D. That's right, a mortgage. So, fixtures, easements, mineral rights, those are all examples of real property. A mortgage obviously is not. Real property is, again, all things attached to the land and the legal rights to it. Real property is usually things that are immovable, such as the home itself or the buildings within it. But there are exceptions that of things that, can't be moved, or I'm sorry, they can be moved. But like stuff for like businesses, business related items, or like mineral rights. Mineral rights are like underneath the ground. They technically can be moved. But again, that would be an example of real property. Yeah, but a mortgage would not. Okay, next one. Question 35. Which of the following contracts would best be described as a contract in which only one party makes a promise to perform an action? And it gives us 4 options. A, an implied contract. B, a bilateral contract. C, a unilateral contract. Or D, an implied in fact contract. So take some time, think about that one, and come with your answer. Okay, so hopefully you guys came up with the correct answer for this one. What is the correct answer for this one? Well, it's going to be C. It is a unilateral contract. So, what is a unilateral contract? Well, a unilateral contract is a contract in which only one party makes a promise to perform an action. Again, uni is one, bi is two. If you remember your prefixes, you should know that. So let's do an example quickly. So let's just say maybe you lost your cat named Coco, and you place an advertisement online offering a $250 reward to the person who returns Coco. But providing a reward, or by providing a reward, you're offering a unilateral contract. Because again, it's not bilateral. The people looking for the cat, they don't have to do that. They didn't agree to do that. It's unilateral. It's essentially their option. Again, one person is involved. Uni is one. Make sense? Hopefully. If not, we have tons of videos on contract law on this channel. I encourage you to look that up. We have tons of stuff, and I could help you even more. Okay, question 36. A homeowner hired a construction company to build a swimming pool at his home. The homeowner failed to pay the bill once the work was completed, and the construction company filed a lien to obtain payment on the debt. The encumbrance created is called it gives us four options: A luxury expense lien, B, property tax lien, C, mechanics lien, or D, a voluntary lien. So take some time and come up with your answer on that one. Okay, so what's our correct answer for this one? Well, it's going to be C. It's a mechanics lien. Mechanics liens are legal documents that essentially reserve the rights of the filer to seek unpaid compensation. They are usually filed by contractors, subcontractors, or suppliers that never receive payment for the work that they performed or materials that they provided on the property. So some of you guys might have put D for this one, voluntary lien. It is not a voluntary lien. It would be an involuntary lien. Remember, mechanics liens are considered involuntary. All right, next one. Question 37. 3 identical properties in a suburban neighborhood were listed at the same time in a market where demand was constant. According to the law of supply and demand, which property would have sold for the lowest price? And it gives us 4 options. A, the first property sold. B, the second property sold. C, the third property sold. Or D, the properties would all sell for the same price. Okay, so go ahead and think this one over. I'm really curious the results on this one, so think it over. Okay, so what is the correct answer for this one? Well, it's going to be A. It's the first property sold. So this is one of those fun, I don't know, I find it fun, but this is one of those fun supply and demand problems where you kind of have to like think in your mind, not really math, but almost like, I don't know, just like problem solving. Like, I don't know, it kind of reminds me of like being back in like grade school when when they give you these like weird scenarios. Anyways, according to the law of supply and demand, the first property sold would have sold for the lowest price. Remember, generally speaking, when the supply of houses goes up, or I'm sorry, when the supply of houses goes down, the price goes up, and vice versa. So this is again one of those supply and demand problems where you have to kind of think, you have to use that principle in your mind and just problem solve. And they do like to throw a lot of these hypothetical questions out there. I think we've had a couple of them already. But yeah, it's just one of those things that you need to be aware of and figure out. Okay, question number 38. There are 3 different main approaches that appraisers use while they make an appraisal. What are they? And of course, it gives us 4 options. A, the estate approach, cost approach, and an economy approach. Excuse me there. Woo! B, the market data approach, cost approach, and tax approach. C, income approach, sales approach, and tax approach. And D, market data approach, cost approach, and income approach. So, like always, think that one over and come with your answer. Okay, so how familiar are you with your different main approaches to value, or approaches that appraisers use while they appraise? Well, if you are familiar with them, you should be able to get this one right, because the answer is D, the market data approach, the cost approach, and income approach. So those are the three different main approaches that appraisers use when they make an appraisal. So the market data approach is also called the sales comparison approach. So if you're looking at that and you're like, what? Like that's why. But again, those terms can be used interchangeably. The cost approach is also referred to as summation. And lastly, the income approach is also known as capitalization. So each method has its own set of benefits, which we really don't need to talk about. But essentially, when they're applied together through the various valuation methods, they can provide a best estimate of the value of either an income producing real estate or some sort of property and things like that. So that is your three main approaches that appraisers use while they make an appraisal. Okay, 39. At the very minimum, advertising property or services by real estate professionals should include what? Ooh, okay, interesting. So there's four options. A, the license number of the broker. B, the brokerage firm's name. C, the office phone number. And D, the service listed. So I'm going to give you guys an opportunity to think that one over and come with your answer. Okay, so I love these questions. These ones are super always interesting to me. So these are those advertising questions, which, obviously you're going to deal with this a lot when you do get your license, which you will. But what is the correct answer for this one? At the very minimum, it should be B, the brokerage firm's name. So obviously, depending on the state and circumstance, states may require additional information. But federally, at the very, very, very minimum, all advertising for property or services must include the broker firm's name. Now, this is for all advertising. It's worth noting that social media included. And obviously, we don't really need to talk about the why, but examples of this could include, again, like printed stuff. Again, I said social media. But yeah, at the very minimum, it has to be the broker's name. And now it's worth noting, again, it depends on the state, because, some might be like, oh, well, what about, if you're in one of the states with agent brokers, all that stuff, you might be like, oh, well, does an agent count? But no, normally, again, federally, it's the broker itself. So if you're working under a broker, you would need your broker's name, not your own name. Does that make sense? And some states, again, it's different. But at the very minimum, again, federally, it's still the brokerage firm's name. So yeah. And then we'll get into the other stuff a little bit later. Hopefully, maybe not in this video, but I can do a video on that in the future. And if not, we do it in our prep course. But anyways, okay, question 40. Which of the following statements about water rights is true? Choose the best answer. Gives us four options. A, water rights are pertinent. B, water rights are transferred exclusively in quitclaim deeds. C, water rights are double taxed similarly to how corporations are taxed. And then D, the two basic forms of water rights are ocean rights and lake rights. So take a moment and think that one over. Come with your answer. Okay, so there's a couple things that when you hear water rights, you should think of. And one of them is that they are appurtenant, which means, do you guys know? Well, it means that it runs with the land and not with the original owner. So, in other words, if an oceanfront property is sold, the new owner gains the littoral rights and the seller relinquishes his or her rights. So, that's super important to understand. I brought up Florida earlier. I'm going to bring it up again. It comes up a lot. Because think about it. I mean, if you sell a property, or let's say you buy a property, how about this? Let's say you buy a beachfront property and then the old owners come and they're like, hey, can we use your beach? You know, we want to surf, man. And then I'd be laughing. I'd be like, no way. And I'd tell them, I said, listen, man, water rights are pertinent. And then they'd probably not know what you're talking about. And then you'd say that you're a real estate agent, and then there'd be some awkward moment. But the point is that, again, they run with the land, not with the original owner. So that guy, he can't come surf, on your area. If it's a private, obviously, if it's a private beach, not like a public. But we're talking about private property here. But yeah, so again, that's kind of how it works there. So I love talking about this stuff. So cut me off if I'm talking too much. Anyways, okay, question 41. A mortgage loan that requires monthly payments of $400 for 15 years and a final payment of $20,000. Typically, a loan structured like this is called and it gives us four options: A, a balloon loan; B, a payday loan; C, a standard loan; or D, a home equity loan. So take some time and think that one over. Okay, so when you see this monthly payment thing and then a final payment, you want to think of a balloon loan, which is our answer. So a balloon loan is a mortgage which, does not fully amortize over the term. So amortization is when the payments divide into equal amounts for the duration of the loan. A balloon loan is different, as not all payments are equally divided, and the most substantial payments are called balloon payments. A common example of a balloon loan is the 7-year Fannie Mae balloon, which features monthly payments based on a 30-year mortgage, making the rate payments much lower. But at the end of the 7 years, the rest of the loan is due. This last payment is called the balloon payment because of its size. At that point, the borrower may sell the home to cover the balloon payment or take out a new loan to cover the payment, effectively refinancing the mortgage. All right, next one. What form, question 42, what form of legal land description consists of principal meridian lines that cover most of the states in the U.S., running north to south, and baselines running east to west? And it gives us four options: A, lot and block; B, meets and bounds; C, public square system; and then D, rectangular survey system. And I need to grab a glass of water. Give me 1 second. Think that one over, and I'll be right back. Alrighty, so I'm back. I had some water, a little scratch in my throat. I apologize there. Okay, so what form of legal description consists of a principal meridian lines that cover most states in the U.S.? So when you hear lines like this, essentially you should know it's D. It's the rectangular survey system. So a rectangular survey system consists of principal meridian lines that cover most states in the U.S. These principal meridian lines are named or numbered to identify their location. Using these lines for references, quadrangles are formed, which are smaller squares identifiable by which they are located near the principal meridian and the baseline. This process continues, creating smaller and smaller grids that identify specific locations of property. So obviously, you need to be familiar with these legal land descriptions and the different types, and I believe we'll cover the other ones later. Okay, question 43. Josh agrees to represent Susan in the sale of her home. The listing contract states that Josh will receive a $15,000, receive a fee of $15,000 from Susan at closing, regardless of the sales price. Is this a legal and a valid form of compensation? And it gives us 4 options. A, no, flat fees are illegal. B, no, the fee has to be given before closing, otherwise it's voided. C, yes, since the fee is lower than the United States regulated minimum, it is legal. And then D, yes, compensation can be determined in different ways, as long as the seller and broker agree. So take a moment to think that one over and come with your answer. Okay, so what is the correct answer for this one? Well, it's going to be D. That's right, compensation can be determined in many different ways. As long as the seller and broker agree, it's okay. Simple as that. All right, next one. Question 44. A buyer and seller entered into a contract. They negotiated the sale of a side lot at the same time as the transfer of the home. What is the second document called? It gives us 4 options. A, an option. B, a contingency. C, an addendum. Or D, an amendment. So take a moment and come with your answer on this one. Alrighty, so if you were paying attention earlier, you should have got this one. Again, one of those things that if you forget the first one and then next thing you miss out on the second one, you're like, it snowballs and you're missing all these points. So remember, when it comes to contract basics, you need to be familiar with a lot of these terms. Contingency, addendum, amendment. What do all they mean? Hopefully you know. For this one, we're talking about C, in addendum. Because again, they negotiated the sale of the side lot at the same time as the transfer of the home. So they're adding something. An addendum is an attachment to a contract that modifies the terms and conditions of the original contract. So the key hint to this problem is right here. It says the buyer and seller entered into a contract. So again, they already entered into that contract. So they need to attach something to it. That would be the addendum. So an example of an addendum being used would be if parties wanted to add something to the original document. For instance, an individual who is purchasing a house, maybe they don't want to purchase all the furniture that is being left behind. However, thinking about it further, they change their mind, so they would have an addendum. Makes sense? Alrighty, next one. 45. In most cases, a tenant in an apartment holds, and it gives us 4 options: A, an easement; B, a license; C, a freehold estate; or D, a leasehold estate. So take some time and think that one over. So in most cases, a tenant in an apartment holds D, a leasehold estate or leasehold interest. So a less than freehold estate, also known as a leasehold estate, is an estate by one who rents or leases property. Now, the key difference between a leasehold and a freehold estate is the limitation of time. As lease is a legal estate, leasehold can be bought and sold on an open market. So again, when you think of tenant, think of leasehold estate, less than freehold estate. Okay, next one, 46. A parcel of land that is subject to an easement is best described as, and it gives us four options: A, a servient estate; B, a dominant estate; C, an estate in sufferance; or D, an estate in tenement. So take a moment to read it over and come with your answer. Okay, so what is the correct answer for this one? Well, it's going to be a servient estate. So, by definition, a servient estate is a parcel of land that is subject to an easement. So, the $1,000,000 way to remember this, the servient versus dominant estate, is that a servient estate they serve the dominant estate. So, essentially, because they're subject to an easement. Does that make sense? So that's the way, at least I remember it in my mind, and I know a lot of students do as well. So maybe that'll help. But yeah, again, remember, it serves. A servient estate serves. They're subject. They're subject to an easement. They serve. Think of it like that. Alrighty. Next one. Oh, here we go. For those of you guys who've been watching the videos for let's just say a while now, this question should be very familiar to you. 47. Usually the appraiser is hired by the, and it gives us four options: A, the buyer; B, the seller; C, the lender; or D, the real estate agent. So go ahead and take a moment to think that one over. Okay, so what is the correct answer for this one? Well, it's going to be C, the lender. So why do I say that the way I am? Well, because last year we had this question and we had a little bit of an error. And actually, when I'm noticing this question, it looks like there's another error. But it's not a problem with the question. It's just we forgot to capitalize the on the very fourth option. So I apologize for that. But no, what happened last year was we accidentally had the wrong answer for the correct answer, essentially. And yeah, it was just this thing, and I got lots of comments about it. So I apologize about that. But we're on to 2022. Let's not think about the past. Let's think about the future. So usually the appraiser is hired by the lender. Yes, the lender or financing organization will hire the appraiser. Now, technically, the seller pays for the appraiser since it comes out of the final sales price. However, the hiring aspect is almost always done by the lender. So that should make sense, right? I mean, the lender wants a neutral third party to come in there, because again, if the buyer or seller, if they had their own way, the appraisal would be higher or lower depending on, again, if they're buying or selling, or depending on what their motives are with the property, things like that. So the lender it takes care of the hiring aspect. And again, if you want to do another one by yourself, you have every right to. But in a regular real estate purchasing process, the appraiser is usually hired by the lender. Okay, next one. 48. What determines who pays for what and how much at closing? It gives us four options: A, the government; B, the seller; C, the buyer; or D, proration. So go ahead and take a moment to think that one over and come up with your answer on this one. Okay, so the correct answer for this one's going to be D, proration. So proration is the allocation or division of money items at closing. Proration comes into play when a seller prepays their home taxes for the year. Because they paid for the full year and are selling the property, the buyer then will then owe the seller the remaining months of taxes. All right, 49. A buyer wants to be represented by several different agents while looking at various properties. This is an example of what? And it gives us 4 options. A, a multiple broker agency agreement. B, a non-exclusive buyer agency. C, an exclusive buyer agency. Or D, an exclusive agents deal. So take a moment to think that one over and come with your answer. Okay, so what is this one? Well, it's going to be B, a non-exclusive buyer agency. So what is that? Well, a non-exclusive buyer agency agreement allows buyers to hire more than one agent to find their home. However, buyers must inform each agent they work with that other agent and that they are involved and whether they have shown them to specific homes and stuff like that. So yeah, that's essentially what a non-exclusive buyer agency is. Okay, question number 50. Is crossing out part of a printed contract allowed and legally enforceable? Ooh, okay, nice. Because there's 4 options. A, yes, it's legally enforceable if both parties agree, but it must still be readable. B, yes, legally enforceable as long as the acting broker signs the changes. C, yes, but only on sales contracts. And D, no, that's an illegal action. Okay, so take a moment, think that one over, and come with your answer. Okay, so what is the correct answer for this one? It's a bit of a trick question. The correct answer for this one's going to be A. Yes, it is legally enforceable if both parties agree, but it must be readable. So again, tricky question. Crossing out part of a printed contract is actually allowed and legally enforceable as long as both parties agree and the original text is still readable. So it's one of those things that, you know, if you didn't know about this specific example, you're probably thinking, no, that's illegal. Like, you can't just like cross out things on a contract, you know. But believe it or not, this is one of those circumstances that the law allows it if both party agrees. And I think that that's, you know, a fair way of looking at it. I mean, it makes sense, right? So again, it's a trick question. It's just one of the specific things that you need to know your contract law, and hopefully you do, and hopefully you got that one right. And if not, well, that's what I'm here for. That's why I'm here. That's why we do these videos, and that's why I'll be here for a while. So yeah, that's going to be part 1 of our practice exam. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Stay tuned for part 2. And don't forget, if you want to study at your own pace, check out our website. It's called realestatelicencewizard.com. There you can take, we have free practice exams. I repeat, free practice exams. Plus, we have lots of other study tools. Really, it's a fantastic website. I would know. I use it almost every day. But no, seriously, check it out. Tell us if you liked it or not. I'd really appreciate that. Anyways, I hope you guys have a fantastic day. As always, this is Zach from realestatelicencewizard.com. Make today magical. See you guys next time.